Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, class. Just wanted to get another video up. Um, this video is going to be on constitutional principles. I am going to break this little constitution review down into two videos. This first one is on constitutional principles. This is how the Constitution works. The second one is going to be on constitutional compromises, which were the deals which had to be struck between states in order to get the Constitution ratified or approved so it could become our plan of government. So remember, the last video I put up was on the Articles of Confederation, and in that we talked about how the Articles of Confederation essentially created a weak central government, and it was a plan of government that was kind of doomed to fail. Really, the way I always like to describe it, it's kind of like a bridge from the American Revolution to the Constitution. The Constitution is our current plan of government, and it did correct many of the issues and problems associated with the Articles of Confederation. So the constitutional principles, the five basic ways with how the Constitution works, which we're going to discuss in this class. Number one is separation of powers. So separation of powers is the constitutional principle which breaks the Constitution down into three basic branches. Remember, the Articles of Confederation only had one branch. It was a legislative branch. Under the Constitution, the government is broken down into three branches. That's the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. You've heard me mention this probably 500 times over the course of the year. Each branch is associated with law in some degree, because it's government's job really to institute, enforce law. The legislative branch is your lawmaking branch. They're the lawmakers. That's Congress, the U.S. Senate, and the House of Representatives. The executive branch is the President of the United States. It's the job of the President to enforce law and make sure that the law is being followed. And the judicial branch is the Supreme Court, and it's the job of the Supreme Court to interpret the law and make sure they say kind of what the law means and what is legal and what is not legal. So that's the first branch of government. The second branch of government, or excuse me, the second principle of the Constitution, not branch, is checks and balances. Checks and balances kind of works with separation of powers and allows those three different branches to all kind of check the power of the others. So an example would be if someone on the Supreme Court were to resign, the president would have the ability to appoint and pick a new Supreme Court justice, because Supreme Court justices are picked by the president of the United States. Well, Congress would have to approve that appointment. So that prevents the president from just doing anything they want. If the president wants to sign a treaty, okay, it needs congressional approval. All right. If Congress passes a law, the president has the ability to veto that law. All right. So essentially what you're really looking at here are the branches all having the ability to check the power of the others. All right. Nora, I'll be with you in 1 minute. Okay, I'll be with you in 1 minute. All right. Sorry, that was my daughter. And she wants to watch Scooby-Doo right now. Next, federalism. Federalism really fixed one of the powers under the Articles of Confederation. If you remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the states had the bulk of the power, and they realized the central government was weak. So what they tried to create with federalism was a division of power, division of power. So the states don't get all the power, the central government doesn't get all the power, they kind of divide it up. And let's start with certain delegated powers which belong to the federal government. It's those delegated powers. These are things that only the federal government can do. Example, go to war, right? The federal government goes to war, not states. Coining money, right? The federal government is responsible for coining money, not states. States don't have their own individual money. States don't go to war. Things only the federal government does. When we look at reserve powers, these are things that the states are responsible for. The easy example I always use in teaching this class to 11th graders in New York State is that you get your driver's license from the state of New York, right? States come up with their own driving laws. Education, right? You guys have to take a regents exam at the end of the year because you're in New York State. And last but not least, the shared powers. These are powers that both levels of government, state and federal have. The common example I always use is taxes, right? The federal government taxes you, state government's tax you. Some of your money goes to Albany, some of your money goes to Washington. The next example, class, is supremacy. This is the fourth principle that I want to go over. And that basically just organizes law in this country. So at the top, you have the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Beneath that would be federal law, beneath that would be state law, and beneath that would be local law. All right. So nothing can overstep the Constitution. So example, the Constitution, the 13th Amendment says slavery is illegal. It is illegal to have slavery in this country. No state down here could pass a state law making slavery legal because they would be violating supremacy, constitutional supremacy. If the Constitution says it, that's the top law of the land. You can't mess with it. You can't violate that. Another example I would use, so the state law, like in New York, right? To get a driver's license, you need to be 16 years old to get a driver's license. Unless you live in the 5 boroughs of New York City, then you have to be 18, right? So Ellenville couldn't come down here with a local law and pass a law which say, you know what, we're going to give driver's license to 12-year-olds because they'd be violating that supremacy ladder. Constitution, federal, state, local. And the last and final example is flexibility. The Constitution, and the reason, one of the major reasons it's allowed to it's been allowed to survive and it's endured for so many years, is the fact that it has the ability to change with the times. So as time changes in this country, the Constitution changes with it, okay? The first and one of the greatest examples of constitutional change is something I just mentioned, amendments, right? So when this country was first founded, little things like that, well, actually big things, but think of it like this: women could not vote, right? Slavery was legal. Well, now, none of that is true, right? Women can vote, slavery is illegal. The Constitution changed with the times through the amendment process. The other example is the Elastic Clause. Congress can pass laws that they consider necessary and proper. Example, we're in this coronavirus outbreak. Congress just passed a stimulus bill, right? And people are going to be receiving money from the federal government because Congress considered it necessary and proper. That's a federal law. Here's constitutional law, federal law, state, local, federal law. Another example, the Affordable Health Care Act, which was passed under Barack Obama, right? That's another modern example of a federal law. Congress felt it was necessary and proper. Was any of that necessary and proper during the time of the Civil War? Absolutely not. But now here we are in 2020, right? Federal stimulus was necessary due to this coronavirus shutdown. I hope this all helps. Those are the 5 constitutional principles and how it works. The next video I'll put up will be about constitutional compromises, and we'll get into like the deals which were struck, which allowed the Constitution to get drafted. I hope this finds everybody well. Email me if you have any questions. Take care.